Welcome into the 615 Sessions podcast, made possible by the wonderful people at Zen Sports. Promo code ATOZTN gets you in on all the action. Today's action, or who will be participating in the action, is Nick Suss of the Tennessean, who joins us now off the not quite frozen tundra that is the Titans practice field, but it's the first time it's actually felt like fall for an extended period of time in Middle Tennessee. Nick, thanks for joining me, buddy. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back.
So I was over there on Wednesday for the Will Levis media availability, but I was not there Thursday or Friday. Sounds like there have been a couple of different things to touch on as this team gets ready to host the Minnesota Vikings, down tremendous at 2-7. The 7-2 Vikings coming to town. One of them is Nicholas Petit-Frere, who I know Brian Callahan disclosed was going to be involved in the starting lineup this week after missing a significant amount of time due to performance issues. What the hell is going on with NPF?
Yeah, that became pretty evident to me yesterday. They confirmed it today. He's back. He's back, and it is not in a replacing Leroy Watson in the rotation type of capacity. It is he is the starter right now. And Isaiah Prince is going to be elevated off the practice squad to be the swing tackle per Callahan. And it's unclear. Callahan says no decision's been made if this is going to be a rotational situation, if this is going to be a 3-for-1 situation, whatever it ends up being. This is not going to be a every drive here, there. And it's not going to be John Ojukwu, who is healthy and on the active roster and has been the rotational tackle these last couple of weeks. It's going to be Isaiah Prince, who hasn't played in an NFL game since, I believe, last September. So it's a lot of moving pieces. And I asked NPF today, essentially, like, look, they told you that the thing you were struggling with was aggression and physicality at the point of attack. What's better? Like, what is going to be better here? And he said he spent a lot of time watching film on how to get more physical. He spent a lot of time working on his mentality. He spent time getting healthier, which there wasn't really an injury concern that I had heard about when he was playing, but getting healthier is something to it. He talked about the same thing Will Levis has talked about of, I missed some time, so I had time to reevaluate, reassess everything. So fresh slate maybe, but we can also recall last year, 2 years ago, the Titans have had guys who were starting at tackle, fell to not start, returned to the starting lineup. The results seldom got significantly better. So it is going to be interesting to see if he can buck that trend.
Yeah, I guess at this point, because Leroy Watson is out officially with a back injury, so, maybe some reason to necessitate some level of change, right? Jalen Duncan remains on injured reserve, and Isaiah Prince is somebody that they haven't tried yet, so why not, I guess, at least make him available in a reserve role in some form or fashion for the first time. But to your point about what they've tried with Nick, this is the thing, and I wonder what your feeling is on it when, like, for example, a couple of years ago, and I believe this was the season before you joined us on the beat in 2022 when
that was my first year here, yeah.
Okay, 2022 was your first year. So the Dennis Daly experience, right? And Lawan is struggling to be healthy. He gets a season-ending knee injury in the first offensive snap of the Buffalo game in week 2. They go to Dennis Daly. They ride that out for a pretty long time without, being willing to admit that maybe they try something else just for the sake of trying something, because Dennis Daly was so ungodly bad at that point in time. So by the time that week 15 rolls around, they finally decide to make a change to Dylan Radins on the road, ironically enough, in Los Angeles, where we just did that last game, and Radins looks like he's doing okay, and then all of a sudden he blows out his knee like 3 or 4 snaps into the second drive of that game. They got to go right back to Dennis Daly. So, like, I'm of two minds on this, because we killed Vrabel and them for not being willing to make a change early enough. So I can't do that and also be hypercritical of Brian Callahan and company for being willing to try multiple options, even though all of us know that the options are insufficient right now.
Yeah, the simple answer is have good players. Like, I wish that there was a simpler way to say it, but like, look, they have been struggling at right tackle for 2 years now. Before JC Latham, they've been struggling at left tackle for 2 years. The reason they're not struggling at left tackle right now is because they went out and got a better left tackle. So it's going to be a stopgap. That you can point at Tyree Phillips, who's on the street. You can point at some people who, oh, go try another guy. Go try another guy. At the end of the day, it's November. Like, you can't just keep trying people. You do have to have the players you have. And so right tackle is going to be one of the 2 or 3 biggest needs this team has this offseason. I am sure they will address it because that tends to be what teams do with their biggest needs. But in the meantime, you got 5 guys on your roster who you could try at right tackle between NPF, Duncan when he's healthy, Watson, Ojukwu, and Prince. Figure out who your best option is right now and play them until they're not the best option anymore.
Yeah, and just essentially survive what is these next 8 games ahead of us in this NFL season. So to that, from the protection to the quarterback, because obviously that continues to be a focal point. By the way, I know you set out maybe a month ago or a couple of weeks ago to try and actively write something that didn't have Will Levis in the headline. How's that going?
Did not write about him this week.
Excellent work by you. Mission accomplished. Even though there is some level of intrigue around him, and I don't know, it's like, I mean, Nick, you remember Marcus Mariota, the end of Marcus Mariota's time here. He was polarizing despite being wholly uninteresting as a human being, as at least his professional front facing. He may be more interesting than he was willing to let on, but that's typically how quarterbacks go. Now I think we're past the point of polarization with Will Levis, where the vast majority of people are just kind of like, all right, whatever, just get through whatever you need to get through, and then we'll see what the results are on the other side, whether it's him here next year or not here next year, or him with a rookie, him with a vet, that kind of situation. But we did see him back in the lineup for the first time in 3 weeks in LA. There was incremental progress made, and I'm not, certainly at 2-7, I'm not going to be dismissive of any kind of progress, incremental or not. This is different, though. This is Minnesota. This is the number 1 defense in terms of EPA per play. This is the 3rd best defense, I believe, in terms of success rate this year. They are one of the most chaotic defenses, or one of the most chaotic defenses to face. They are one of the best disguised defenses, and they are excellent against the run, which means that you cannot just hand off to Tony Pollard as many times as you would, because there's just nowhere to go against this particular defense, unless for some reason they have an inexplicable drop off this week in Nashville. He made progress in LA, and now he faces Minnesota. There is a general concern that there could still be progress made, even if we don't see it, and he's running for his life back there all day.
Yeah. No, I mean, I actually, as an experiment yesterday, tried to go through and write down what I thought the stats for every Will Levis game would have to be, like the minimum for the last 9 games. How good does he have to be for me to think, oh, he didn't screw that one up? And like, let me pull it up for what I chose for this game, because it wasn't super impressive. What did I say? How does my email work? I don't know.
You sound like John Glennon. But it would be fair to expect that this would not be the most impressive.
No. If he throws for 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks, I'm still not saying that's a bad game.
No.
Like this is a game where the main thing I want to see from Will is for something to go wrong and him to respond like it didn't affect him.
Yep.
Like, when we talk about incremental progress, it can sound patronizing at times, but we are truly just saying, what is a thing you're not very good at? Can you be a little bit better at it? And the main problem through those first 3 starts that Will had was something would go wrong and the Titans would have no ability to respond. And I think if you look at that first drive of the second half against LA, I know they only got 3 points out of it. They're talking all week about how they want 7. But you have a situation there where this team had points taken off of the board because of a refereeing mistake. And they had 15 minutes of halftime to fester and stew on this. And then they come out and they get points on a 55-yard drive or whatever it was out of the break. That's the sort of thing that this team didn't have. And I need to see more of that against a defense like Minnesota that is going to force you to be the one to make a mistake. They responded to adversity in that sense, but they didn't really respond to themselves making the mistake. So now what's going to happen if Will goes out and fumbles or throws an interception or Tony fumbles or there's a mistake that backs them up and they have to 3 and out from deep in their own territory or whatever it is? That happens. What do you do? And I want to see them show some backbone in a situation like that. And even if they lose by 3 scores, if they show the ability to bounce back, I give this a check mark on the progress-o-meter.
No, I'm the progress-o-meter. I love that. I imagine you somewhere in the offices of the Tennessean with an actual measurement of the progress-o-meter at this point in time. But I think that's great nuance to approach this with, right? Because there have been so many times where it's not even a situation where he's presented with adversity that he has to overcome before he gets sped up, right? Like sometimes he'll just be out there uncomfortable with what he's seeing. And even if they have a lead or whatever may happen, it may just be a routine drive after, a possession that they forced a punt or maybe the opposition kicked a field goal. I'm just presenting hypotheticals here. And you just see him playing too fast, which is for whatever that LA game was. And I asked Tony about this on Monday, I guess, when we talked to him after we all got back, is that did you feel like there was a different level of poise that he brought to the huddle with you guys where it's just less, I think the word that I'm looking for is frenetic energy that he brings to the situation. And at least from observing him from on high in the press box, I didn't feel like he was overwhelmingly getting sped up as often as I was used to seeing him, which again, incremental progress, to your point, sounds patronizing, but like this shit matters.
Yeah. Like I'm sure you've heard this. We're talking to people in the organization. People who would know, high-ranking people have told me consistently this entire year, we're not going to know until January. We're not going to make a decision until the season is over and it's time to make a decision. Nobody who has any power within this organization is out on Will Levis. So they're looking at the same things we're talking about right now. They are looking at what are the signifiers that week 10 was better than week 9, was better than week 8, was better than week 7. And so if I'm looking ahead on the schedule, I don't see a game that Will really needs to air it out and look like he can be this guy who throws for 350 and 3 touchdowns until Washington, until Indy. Like he doesn't really need to show that until a game where, look, go out and play. This is a winnable game. Win it with your arm. I'm not saying this isn't a winnable game, but what I'm saying is the path to winning this game is mitigating error. We don't need to see the Will who goes out and puts the team on his back, progress-wise, progress-o-meter, for another 4 weeks.
So now we talk about the other side of the ball that is dealing with its own. I don't want to quite call it an identity crisis, but they are at a bit of a crossroads, let's say, where they do a lot of things well, and they are a defense that is, it is the best coached unit, the most consistent unit on the football team right now, which you can talk about how relatively important that is when you're 2-7, but still, they're coming off a game where they allow a 95-yard touchdown drive where they are, again, back to after, finding ways to bother a rookie quarterback in Drake May a week ago, the New England Patriots. They're back to the situation where they're not consistently disrupting the quarterback and disrupting the passing game as a result, not just the sacks, but the pressures alone, right? And you bring up that overturned call, the officiating error. With the strips, the thing that we all saw was a strip sack, a fumble, a touchdown until NFL officiating in New York told everybody it wasn't. Even Brian Callahan, after telling him it was, then told him it wasn't, whatever. That was really the only pressure of consequence in that game.
Yeah.
And LA's got a good offensive line. Minnesota's dealing with some, they're working through their own stuff, right? Cam Robinson's in at left tackle now. Darisaw going down has mattered for them significantly. But from the defensive side of things, they are dealing with 2 problems discernibly. One is the thing that's consistently been their biggest weakness from my standpoint is that they don't get enough pressure. 2 is that this eye discipline thing that we continue to have to bring up on a regular basis is so pronounced, particularly in the red zone, and their special teams does them no favors, Nick. We know this. They set them up for failure all the time. And it's a lot to ask this damn defense to be like, just hold them to a field goal. That's your job, right? When it's week after week after week that we're talking about disadvantageous field position for the defense. But I don't know necessarily how much better they can get at this point, given the injury situation that they're dealing with, and just generally, like we talked about with right tackle, like they are who they are at this point in the season.
Yeah, not to be Mr. Broken Record repeats himself, man, but like we spent 9 months talking about how this team doesn't have that good of a pass rush. So I am not sitting here angry that the pass rush is not that good. Like they spent $250 million improving this team this offseason. And the closest they came to addressing the pass rush from the edge was drafting somebody with the 6th to last pick in the draft. Like they did not improve a situation that was not very good last year. So like, again, if I am building the Titans this offseason, getting an A1 edge rusher is either my first or second priority. It is of huge consequence. But I will say on the positive side, the interior pass rush, which they did invest in, has been looking better these last 3 games. And the blitz packages, which we thought would probably be a little bit more active than they've been with Denard Wilson, they've been starting to pay off a little bit, even without Ernest Jones on the team. The eye discipline stuff, Quandre Diggs didn't have a problem with it, and L'Jarius Sneed didn't have a problem with it. Like, this is an inexperienced group where you are not just replacing veterans with rookies or veterans with young players, but you're replacing the cornerstone pieces of your defense with inexperienced players. So none of this is to make an excuse. Like, they're pro football players. Go out and play well. Go out and force 1 field goal against the Lions or something like that instead of 5 straight red zone touchdowns or whatever it ended up being. But like, fundamentally, these aren't problems that are tough to explain. They're problems that you probably could have seen coming before the season, and here we are.
It's fair, and I think that people tend to look. I mean, we've talked about this enough, and you and I have probably had conversations to this effect, right? There's just such a limited amount of sample size to analyze on a week by week basis, and you have so much time in between each individual game to overthink some of the positions that you may have had, or try and talk yourself out of a situation that you may be feeling at any given point. It's just, that's the nature of football. But to your point, like, Sneed has been down for now. This will be his 5th game. Brian Callahan ruled him out again. I know a handful of us caught up in the locker room with him on Wednesday in particular. And I don't know if I should be surprised by the idea that he has been able to do absolutely nothing on the practice field, as he informed all of us, because he doesn't do a whole lot of practicing anyway. So maybe that's just me out or being hyperbolic about a situation, but that was still 5 weeks in without an injured reserve stint. That's an interesting thing to volunteer to us, where in a press conference setting, or not press conference setting, but a media setting, where he's basically just repeating reporters' questions back to them as a means of answering the question, which is smart. Good job by him. Will Levis should be taking notes. I think that in particular, though, when I look at the places that we're talking about, Nick, both with right tackle and with edge, and not to get into a way too early draft conversation, but from a how do you fix the football team discussion. Edge, as you said, first or second priority. Right tackle, and frankly, right guard, because I know Radunz coming off an injury, but last week was a tough go for Dylan Radunz. And again, there can be explanations that are not yet excuses, but something to monitor. That right side of the offensive line is their biggest bugaboo right now. So you're talking about a couple of different things that aren't quarterback, right? And you're talking about a situation where a lot of people are going to want to replace the quarterback externally, are going to want to replace, and maybe internally by the time we get to it. But right now, there's going to be a lot of discussion about replacing the quarterback when they have so many other issues besides just a quarterback problem, as we saw in the 3 weeks that Will Levis wasn't available. So with people like Jeremy Fowler putting out just a prognostication, right? It's not reporting of consequence yet, but it's an informed guess about where free agents might potentially land. this coming off season, and you see him volunteer Sam Darnold, who's coming to town, as somebody who would make a lot of sense for the Titans. The more that I talk to people in the organization, Nick, the more that I think they're very cognizant of the fact that it's not just a quarterback problem. And I think the preference from a lot of people would be to try and stopgap vet their way through at least the upcoming season while filling out the roster with more competent pieces and parts to do exactly the kind of thing that Deion Sanders, for example, is talking about this week on Fox, where they have an infrastructure, a legit support system in place for whomever would eventually play quarterback as a rookie for this franchise. Not just, and I think to use Deion's words, but not just throwing them out there to the wolves the way that we see with a lot of these rookie quarterbacks in today's NFL.
Yeah, you want to oversimplify football real quick? There are 5 things that matter in the modern NFL. Can you throw the football? Can you protect the guy who throws the football? Can you catch the passes that the guy who throws the football throws?
Slow down, you're going too fast. I have to make notes.
Can you rush the guy who throws the football? And can you prevent the guy who throws the football from getting the ball to the guy he's trying to throw it to? When we talk about positional valuation and all this stuff about, running backs pay, all this stuff, fundamentally the 5 things that matter are quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, edge rusher, cornerback. That's why these are the 5 premium positions. And if I pose to you the question right now, heading into 2025, how many of these positions do you feel set about with the Tennessee Titans? It's left tackle, and it's probably cornerback.
Yeah.
And when you are feeling confident about 1.5 out of those 5 criteria, you got a lot to work on. And so you could go get the second coming of Joe Montana, but he's still going to have an uphill battle of looking good when there's so many things that need to be addressed, which is why, was it Bill Parcells, the philosophy of the quarterback's always the last thing you draft? Sometimes you got to preach that patience. Sometimes you have to understand if Will is not the guy, which again, let's see what these next 9 games look like.
Sure.
If he's not the guy, is it worth it to just go get another guy and put him in a bad situation? I think that the Titans could be 2 or 3 pieces away if they're the right 2 or 3 pieces. But I also think that, look, it's taking time for everybody. Like Skoronski's starting to come into his own a year and a half after being the 11th pick in the draft. It takes time, even when you're one of those can't miss super polished prospects. It's doubly difficult when you're a quarterback.
Yeah.
So I don't want to just say a right tackle solves it. I don't want to say an edge rusher solves it. I don't want to say a quarterback solves it. There's a lot that is needed to get to the point where, look, I wrote a lot this week about Callahan's comment about being improved under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really fascinating concept. And I talked to a lot of guys about, well, what's happening under the surface? Like, what does this mean to be better under the surface? And essentially, anyone who's been in a thriving organization will tell you, being good under the surface means you have the continuity and the internal respect to go out and say, well, something's not working. We know how to fix this. Let's fix it. Right now, they don't have that continuity. They don't have that, especially not on offense, that one guy who they can look to say, well, this is what happens when things are going bad. Let's fix it. That's what they're building right now. They're not building the front-facing, oh, they got better because their edge rusher is 14% better at rushing the passer than he was a week ago. They're building a foundation. So let's give them a chance to see if that foundation bears fruit.
He's Nick Suss of the Tennessean. At Nick Suss is where you follow him. Tennessean.com is, of course, where you read him. Buddy, thank you, as always, for the insight. And maybe, or maybe not, Nick Suss might have made you look. Who's to say? Thanks for taking some time, brother.